The radio transmission crackled with barely suppressed terror as Overwatch received communication from Sierra 4 announcing they were encircled by over 50 hostile combatants with no escape route available. The transmission terminated abruptly as weapons fire exploded through the speaker, producing sounds of men struggling for survival in combat they could not win. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Hayes monitored from the operations center with clenched jaw, recognizing he was about to lose an 8-member SEAL team to an adversary that had trapped them flawlessly. Then another voice emerged across the channel, so subdued he nearly overlooked it, female and composed, informing Overwatch that Shadow 1 had visual contact on Sierra 4 with 53 hostiles confirmed and engaging. Hayes felt his blood chill, understanding Shadow 1 was not supposed to be anywhere near that sector. Shadow 1 represented a myth, a legend, a classified asset that most personnel in naval special warfare questioned existed. But the sniper rifle discharge that followed, distant and suppressed yet unmistakable, made him believe. The initial enemy combatant collapsed before anyone comprehended what was occurring, followed by the second and third. And in a compound in northern Syria where 8 Navy SEALs had been about to perish, Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross emerged from shadows that had concealed her for 6 hours and commenced eliminating threats with the precision that would become legendary. The mission had been straightforward, excessively straightforward, which should have been the initial warning. 8 SEALs inserting into a Syrian compound to capture a high-value target coordinating attacks across 3 countries, with intelligence indicating light security and minimal resistance for an in-and-out operation. Intelligence proved incorrect. The team had been compromised the moment they breached the compound barrier, with what should have been 5 guards transforming into 50 fighters pouring from buildings they did not know existed. The SEALs fought their way into a defensive location in a 2-story structure but were trapped, surrounded, sustaining casualties they could not afford. What they did not know, what they could not have known, was that 6 hours earlier, a lone figure had infiltrated the compound through a drainage channel that intelligence had not charted, had climbed to a vantage location on the 3rd floor of a partially collapsed building overlooking the entire complex, had settled into position with a rifle that most snipers would never be authorized to carry, and had been waiting. Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross, 27 years old with 3 tours with Joint Special Operations Command and a classified elimination count exceeding 60 confirmed kills, was not supposed to be there. Her mission parameters had been reconnaissance exclusively. Observe the compound, gather intelligence, and report back. But Ross had learned years ago that mission parameters changed when lives were threatened, and watching 8 SEALs perish because she followed orders was not something her conscience would accept. She had been monitoring the compound through her scope for 6 hours when the SEALs made their approach, had observed the trap being prepared with fighters moving into position and the ambush being established. She had attempted to warn them, keying her radio 3 times in the warning pattern signifying abort mission, but either they had not received it or had chosen to proceed regardless. Now they were paying the consequence. Through her Schmidt and Bender scope, Ross observed the SEALs fighting from the defensive location, seeing muzzle flashes from 8 different weapons with all 8 men still in the fight but barely, understanding. Ammunition would run out soon and medical supplies would run out sooner. The enemy had them surrounded in a horseshoe configuration, pouring fire into the building from 3 directions, preparing for the final assault that would overrun the position. Ross made a decision that would either save 8 lives or terminate her career. She retrieved her radio and transmitted to Overwatch, announcing her presence and her intention to engage, then commenced work. Her rifle was a heavily modified semi-automatic sniper system chambered in standard caliber equipped with a suppressor that reduced but did not eliminate the acoustic signature. She possessed 200 rounds of match-grade ammunition, a backup pistol she would never need at these ranges, and years of training that had taught her how to make every shot count. The first target was straightforward, an enemy combatant directing the assault from behind a low barrier, his position offering perfect protection from the SEAL's angles but completely exposed to Ross's elevated position. She centered the crosshairs on his torso, compensated for the 300-meter range and slight wind from the east, and pressed the trigger. The rifle coughed as the suppressor reduced the report to something that would not immediately reveal her position. 300 meters away, the combatant collapsed as though someone had severed his strings, deceased before he understood he had been shot. Ross worked the bolt, chambering the next round with mechanical precision. Her breathing was controlled, her heart rate steady at 55 beats per minute. She was not nervous or frightened. This was what she did, what she had trained for through thousands of hours of practice, what made her one of the most effective snipers in the command. Target 2 was moving between positions, attempting to coordinate a flanking maneuver. Ross led him by half a body length, squeezed the trigger, and watched him drop. 2 down, 51 remaining. The enemy still did not know they were being engaged from a position they thought was unoccupied. They were focused on the SEALs, pouring fire into the defensive position, shouting orders, preparing for their assault. Ross used that focus against them, working methodically through their leadership structure, every combatant who was giving orders, every position coordinating the attack, every threat that posed the greatest danger to the SEALs. She prioritized machine gun positions that could suppress the entire SEAL team, then rocket-propelled grenade carriers that could destroy the building the SEALs were defending, then radio operators that could call for reinforcements. In 3 minutes, she eliminated 9 high-value targets. The enemy still did not understand what was happening, seeing their leaders falling and the key positions going silent, but in the chaos of a firefight, it took time to recognize a pattern. Ross gave them no time. She transitioned from methodical elimination to rapid engagement. The suppressor kept her position ambiguous. The elevated angle made her fire seem like it was coming from multiple directions, and the enemy started to panic, pulling back from their advanced positions and seeking better cover, their assault momentum breaking. The SEALs recognized the change immediately. Ross could hear them over the radio, confused but professional, taking advantage of the enemy's disorganization to improve their own positions, redistribute ammunition, and treat their wounded. Ross transmitted to Sierra 4, her voice calm despite the intensity of the engagement, informing them their 9 o'clock position had 3 machine gun nests she was eliminating now, and when they were down they had a 30-second window to reposition to the northeast corner. Requesting acknowledgement. There was a pause, then a male voice, rough with adrenaline but controlled, identifying as Sierra 4 Actual, copying all and asking who she was. Ross replied she was someone who did not want to watch them die and to stand by for suppression. Ross shifted her aim to the machine gun positions she had identified, 3 fighters well positioned behind sandbags, putting sustained fire on the SEAL position. They thought they were safe behind their fortifications but were wrong. Ross put 3 rounds through the sandbags, the penetrators defeating the improvised protection as though it were paper. 3 fighters down in 5 seconds. The machine guns went silent. She announced Sierra 4 was clear and to move now. She watched through her scope as the SEALs executed a tactical displacement, moving to a better position while she kept suppressive fire on anyone who tried to track their movement. 2 enemy combatants emerged to engage the moving SEALs, and Ross dropped both before they could fire. 15 enemies eliminated, 38 remaining. But the enemy was adapting, having figured out that someone was shooting at them from an elevated position, and they were spreading out, making themselves harder targets and using cover more effectively. Some were starting to scan the surrounding buildings, attempting to identify Ross's location. She needed to move. Ross broke down her position in 30 seconds, secured her rifle, collected her brass casings to leave no evidence, and moved to a secondary position she had prepared 3 hours earlier. It was 20 meters away with a different angle and different line of sight. By the time enemy combatants started putting rounds into her original position, she was already re-established and engaging from the new location. The enemy's confusion multiplied. They thought they had identified her position, but fire was still coming, and now it seemed like it was from a different angle entirely. Some combatants started shooting at shadows, wasting ammunition on empty buildings. Others huddled behind cover, afraid to move and afraid to expose themselves to the unseen threat. Ross exploited their fear, picking off anyone who showed courage, anyone who tried to rally their forces, anyone who attempted to organize a counterattack. Leadership was systematically eliminated, initiative was punished with immediate death, and the enemy force that had been a coordinated assault element began fragmenting into individuals focused on personal survival. Then things got complicated. A technical vehicle, a pickup truck with a mounted heavy machine gun, came roaring into the compound from the east gate. The large caliber gun could tear through the SEAL's defensive position like tissue paper. Ross saw the threat immediately, adjusted her aim, and took the shot that mattered most. The driver's head snapped back as the round found its mark. The technical swerved violently with the deceased driver's weight on the steering wheel, sending the vehicle careening into a concrete barrier at 40 km/h. The gunner was thrown from the truck bed, landing hard on the ground. He was attempting to get up when Ross's second shot put him down permanently. But the crash had drawn attention, with enemy combatants converging on the wrecked technical, and some of them were finally looking in the right direction toward Ross's building, toward the elevated position that had been killing them for the past 6 minutes. Ross saw muzzle flashes from multiple positions, all aimed at her general area, with rounds beginning to impact the walls around her, punching through the degraded concrete and sending dust and fragments into the air. She was taking fire from at least 8 different shooters, and while none of them had her exact position yet, it was only a matter of time. She made herself a smaller target, repositioning behind a support column, and continued engaging. An enemy combatant was setting up a rocket-propelled grenade to fire at her building, and Ross put a round through his chest before he could aim. Another combatant was directing the incoming fire, pointing toward her position, and Ross eliminated him with a headshot that made the others hesitate. Sierra 4 transmitted asking about her status as she was taking fire. Ross replied she was fine and to stay in position, announcing she was about to make things interesting. Ross had prepared for this contingency, having placed demolition charges in strategic locations around the compound 3 hours earlier during her initial reconnaissance, not enough to level buildings but enough to create chaos and confusion at a moment of her choosing. She keyed the remote detonator, and 3 explosions erupted simultaneously across the compound, a fuel depot on the western barrier, a vehicle storage area near the main gate, and an ammunition cache in the southern building. The combined effect was spectacular, with massive fireballs illuminating the pre-dawn darkness, secondary explosions as stored munitions cooked off, and debris raining down across the entire complex. The enemy combatants panicked, with some thinking they were under aerial bombardment and others thinking the SEALs had reinforcements. All of them stopped shooting at Ross's position and sought cover from what they thought was a massive assault. Ross used those 10 seconds of chaos to eliminate 6 more targets, combatants who were exposed and confused, easy prey for someone who remained calm and focused. Her rifle spoke with methodical precision. Target acquired, round fired, target down, next target. 6 shots, 6 eliminations, bringing her total to 21. The SEALs understood what was happening and began their own offensive push, emerging from the defensive position with coordinated fire and movement, engaging enemy combatants who were still reeling from the explosions. Ross provided overwatch, eliminating threats that the SEALs could not see and calling out positions while directing their advance. She transmitted that Sierra 4 had 2 hostiles in the second floor window at their 1 o'clock position and she was engaging now. Her rifle barked twice as 2 combatants tumbled from the window. She announced 3 more trying to flank from the alley on their right and to hold position. Ross shifted her aim, tracked the 3 combatants moving through the narrow alley, and timed her shots for when they passed through gaps in cover. 3 quick shots, 3 bodies dropped in the alley, the flanking attempt defeated before it developed. The SEALs pushed harder, clearing buildings, neutralizing resistance, and consolidating their position. The enemy force was disintegrating, with some combatants fleeing toward the compound exits, others surrendering, and the rest dying as they tried to maintain a defense that had completely collapsed. But Ross's situational awareness flagged a new threat. 4 enemy combatants were setting up a mortar position on a rooftop 200 meters away. If they got that weapon operational, they could drop indirect fire on the SEAL position with devastating effect. Ross calculated the shot: 200 meters, elevated target, wind gusting from the northeast, multiple shooters working in coordination. She would need to eliminate all 4 quickly before they could scatter or return fire. She took a breath, let it out slowly, and entered what snipers called the zone, that mental state where time seemed to slow down, where every variable became clear, where muscle memory and training merged into something approaching supernatural precision. First shot eliminated the spotter who was looking through binoculars and calling adjustments. He dropped without seeing the round that killed him. Second shot eliminated the gunner who was adjusting the mortar elevation. He collapsed across the weapon he had been setting up. Third shot eliminated the loader who was reaching for another round. He never completed the motion. Fourth shot eliminated the commander who was finally realizing they were under attack and trying to run. He made it 3 steps before Ross's bullet caught him between the shoulder blades. 4 shooters, 4 shots, 7 seconds. The mortar position was eliminated before it could fire a single round. Ross transmitted that the mortar threat was neutralized and Sierra 4 was clear to advance to the north compound. The SEAL team leader responded asking how many weapons she had up there, noting that was at least 30 eliminations. Ross replied 1 gun and just making it count. The SEALs understood what was happening and began to exploit it, shifting from defensive to aggressive, launching their own counterattacks against disorganized enemy positions, reclaiming ground, and establishing fire superiority. Ross coordinated with them over the radio, calling out targets, identifying threats they could not see, and directing their movements with the tactical awareness that only came from elevated observation and years of experience. She transmitted that Sierra 4 had 4 hostiles trying to flank their west position, 2 behind the blue truck and 2 in the doorway at their 10 o'clock, announcing she was engaging the truck position now. Her rifle spoke twice as 2 bodies dropped behind the truck. The SEALs engaged the doorway position with grenades and automatic fire, eliminating that threat. 28 enemies down, 25 remaining. But ammunition was becoming a concern. Ross had fired 85 rounds and had 115 remaining. She needed to be more selective and more conservative, as every shot had to count because the SEALs needed her fire support to maintain their momentum. She shifted tactics, focusing on targets that posed imminent danger to the SEALs rather than targets of opportunity. A rocket-propelled grenade gunner lining up a shot on the SEAL position, eliminated before he could fire. A group of combatants preparing to storm the building, with 3 quick shots that killed the leaders and broke the assault. A sniper on a distant rooftop targeting the SEALs, eliminated with 1 round at 400 meters that ended that threat permanently. The enemy sniper had been good with a concealed position, good angle, and patience, but Ross was better. She had spotted him from his muzzle signature when he had fired at one of the SEALs, had calculated his position from the angle of his shot, and had waited for him to settle back into his scope for his next shot. When he did, when his silhouette appeared in the scope for just a moment, Ross fired. The round crossed 400 meters in under a second, found the enemy sniper's head, and eliminated someone who might have killed multiple SEALs if Ross had not been there. The SEALs were pushing now, clearing buildings, consolidating positions, and turning a defensive disaster into an offensive success. But the enemy still had numbers and still had combatants willing to die, and the battle was far from over. Then Ross saw him, the high-value target, the man this mission had been about, attempting to escape through a back exit with 4 bodyguards. He was abandoning his combatants, leaving them to die while he fled to safety. Ross made a decision. She could keep supporting the SEALs or she could complete their original mission objective. She chose both, transmitting that the primary target was exiting through the north compound exit with 4 security personnel and she was engaging, asking if Sierra 4 could handle the 12 hostiles remaining in the main compound. Sierra 4 replied affirmatively and told her to take the shot. Ross shifted her aim to the fleeing group. Range 450 meters, targets moving at speed, weaving between obstacles, professional security detail that knew how to protect a principal. This would not be easy. She started with the bodyguards as they were threats and they were blocking her shot at the primary target. The first one went down cleanly with a center mass shot that dropped him instantly. The others reacted professionally, forming a protective shield around their principal, moving faster, and making themselves harder targets. Ross adjusted, leading her targets and timing her shots to when their movement patterns exposed vulnerabilities. Second bodyguard down, caught him during a turn when his body armor did not cover his side. Third bodyguard down with a headshot when he looked back to check their six. The fourth one was exceptional, using cover effectively, staying close to the principal, and making a clean shot nearly impossible. So Ross shot him through the vehicle he was hiding behind. The round punched through the car door, through the bodyguard's torso, through his spine, and into the engine block behind him. He collapsed with blood spreading across the dusty ground, leaving the high-value target completely exposed and alone. The man realized his situation and ran, sprinted for the compound barrier with the terror that came from knowing death was stalking him. He was fast, probably had been a combatant himself before becoming a coordinator, and he moved with the evasive patterns that suggested training. Ross tracked him through her scope, compensating for his speed and erratic movement, waiting for the moment when his pattern became predictable. It came when he approached the barrier. He had to commit to his path, had to stop weaving, had to focus on the climb. Ross led him by 2 body lengths, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger with the gentle pressure that came from years of training. The round flew true, caught the high-value target in the upper spine, and dropped him 15 feet from the barrier he had been trying to climb. The mission objective completed by someone who was not even supposed to be on the mission. Ross transmitted that the primary target was down, requesting confirmation from their position when able. Sierra 4 replied they were moving to confirm now, adding seriously that was the best shooting he had ever seen. Ross smiled slightly but kept scanning for threats, understanding the battle was not over until every hostile was neutralized or had fled. She continued to provide overwatch while the SEALs cleared the remaining combatants, eliminating 3 more enemy fighters who tried to ambush the team during their clearing operations, each one dropping before they could fire at the SEALs who had never seen them. One combatant had been particularly dangerous, concealed in a destroyed vehicle with a clear angle on the SEAL point man, finger on the trigger of a rocket-propelled grenade that would have killed at least 2 Americans. Ross saw him a half-second before he fired, put a round through the tiny gap between his cover and his position, and watched him slump forward with the grenade falling unfired from dead hands. 35 enemies killed, 18 fled into the Syrian countryside where they would spend the rest of their lives knowing that an American sniper had destroyed their entire force, and 8 Navy SEALs survived what should have been a massacre. When the compound was finally secure, when the last hostile had either died or retreated, Ross broke down her position and prepared to exfiltrate. She had been in position for nearly 7 hours, had engaged in one of the most intense sniper operations in recent memory, and had saved 8 lives while completing a high-value target elimination that would disrupt enemy operations for months. She was packing her equipment when her radio crackled with Sierra 4 Actual stating they would like to meet the Guardian Angel and asking her position. Ross hesitated, having been trained to avoid direct contact with the units she supported, to remain in the shadows, to complete her mission without recognition or acknowledgement. But something about the way the SEAL team leader had said it, the genuine gratitude in his voice, made her reconsider. She transmitted that she was moving to the compound north barrier in 5 minutes. She descended from her hide position, moving through the compound with the tactical awareness that kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. Even with the enemy defeated, training dictated caution. She cleared corners, checked for stragglers, kept her rifle ready, even though the probability of contact was minimal. The SEALs were waiting at the north barrier when she arrived. 8 men, dirt-covered, blood-stained, exhausted, but alive. They looked at her with expressions that ranged from gratitude to disbelief. Ross was 5 feet 6 inches, maybe 130 pounds, young enough to be underestimated by people who did not know better. She was carrying a rifle that weighed nearly 20 pounds with ammunition and optics, wearing tactical gear that added another 30 pounds, and she did not look like she had just fought a battle that had left 35 enemy combatants dead. The team leader stepped forward, a man in his mid-30s, weathered with the eyes that came from seeing too much combat. He identified himself as Lieutenant Commander Hayes from SEAL Team 7, stating that was the most impressive shooting he had ever witnessed. Ross slung her rifle and extended her hand, identifying herself as Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross from Joint Special Operations Command attached, glad she could help. Hayes shook her hand firmly, stating help was an understatement as she had saved their lives when they were about to be overrun. He had 8 men about to die with no way to save them, then she arrived. He gestured at the compound, at the bodies scattered throughout, at the evidence of precision shooting that had turned impossible odds into a tactical victory, asking where she had come from. Ross replied simply she had been there for 6 hours on a reconnaissance mission, and when she saw them insert, she tried to warn them off as the compound was more heavily defended than intelligence indicated. Hayes stated they got no warning, probably radio interference, and by the time she realized they were not receiving it they had already committed. Ross shrugged, stating that at that point mission parameters changed, she could watch them die or she could engage, and chose to engage. One of the other SEALs, a younger operator with a Texas accent, spoke up addressing her respectfully, stating he counted at least 35 hostile eliminations in 12 minutes from concealment while coordinating their movements and completing the primary mission objective, noting that was not just help but miraculous. Ross did not respond to that, did not know how to respond to praise that seemed excessive even if it was technically accurate. She had done what needed doing, used skills that had been refined through years of training, and had achieved results that training made possible. She stated instead that their team performed well under pressure, maintained discipline, took advantage of opportunities she created, and displayed good tactical awareness despite being outnumbered and outgunned. Hayes smiled slightly, asking if that was her way of saying they were not completely incompetent. Ross replied that was her way of saying they were SEALs and she would expect nothing less. Ross checked her watch, noting the extraction window opened in 20 minutes and they should consolidate and move to the landing zone. Hayes agreed, turning to his team to gear up as they were moving in 10. During those 10 minutes while the SEALs prepared to move, Ross provided security and answered questions about who she was and why she had been in the compound. She was careful about what she revealed, acknowledging her command affiliation while keeping her mission parameters classified. Her shooting skills were obviously demonstrated but not explained in detail. What she did not tell them, what she could not tell them, was that she had been specifically chosen for this reconnaissance mission because analysts suspected the compound was more dangerous than standard intelligence suggested. That her presence had been a calculated risk assessment by commanders who thought the SEALs might need backup but could not officially assign it. That she had been given latitude to engage if circumstances required it, even though official orders said reconnaissance only. Sometimes military operations existed in gray areas where written orders and practical necessity did not align. Ross had learned to operate in those gray areas, to make decisions that higher command could not officially authorize but would not punish if they succeeded. Today had succeeded. 8 SEALs alive, high-value target eliminated, enemy force destroyed, mission accomplished by someone who officially was not even there. The extraction went smoothly, with helicopters picking them up from a pre-designated landing zone and flying them back to the forward operating base where debriefs and medical care waited. Ross separated from the SEALs once they landed, heading to different areas for different reporting chains, as command assets did not debrief with regular SEAL teams even when they had saved those teams' lives. But before she disappeared into the classified side of the base, Hayes caught her, thanking her seriously and stating they would all be dead without her. Ross replied they would have found a way, though they both knew that was not true, adding that SEALs always do. Hayes replied not this time, meeting her eyes and stating this time they needed a guardian angel they did not know they had, and he was putting her in for a commendation. Ross requested quickly that he please not do that, stating she was never there, this mission never happened, and he knew how the command works. Hayes studied her for a moment, then stated off the record that she was the kind of operator they all hoped was out there watching their backs, the kind that makes impossible missions survivable, the kind that reminds them why they do this. Ross did not know how to respond to that either, so she just nodded, accepted the sentiment, and walked away into the shadows that were her natural environment. The after-action reports were carefully warded. 8-man SEAL team engaged superior enemy force in compound operation, enemy force defeated through superior tactics and marksmanship, high-value target eliminated, 0 friendly casualties, with technical details classified and contributing personnel classified. But within naval special warfare, the story spread about the SEAL team that had been surrounded and outnumbered, minutes from being overrun, about the voice that came over the radio, female and calm, promising salvation, about the shooting that followed with precision. Fire that eliminated 35 enemies in 12 minutes, about the operator they called Shadow 1 who appeared from nowhere and disappeared back into nowhere after saving 8 lives. Some said it was exaggerated, some said it could not be real as no single sniper could achieve that elimination count that quickly, and some said it was a team effort that got attributed to one person in the retelling. But the 8 SEALs who had been there knew the truth. They had seen the evidence. 35 bodies dropped with the precision that only came from world-class marksmanship. They had coordinated with her over the radio, heard her calm voice directing their movements. They had met her afterward, seen the small woman with the large rifle who had accomplished what seemed impossible. And they knew that somewhere in the command machinery, there were operators like Amaya Ross who operated in the shadows, who took missions that did not officially exist, who saved lives without seeking recognition or reward. Lieutenant Commander Hayes put her in for a commendation anyway, knowing it would be classified and she would never be able to acknowledge it publicly. The citation was brief and understated as all classified commendations were, but it noted that on a specific date in a specific location, a command asset had engaged superior enemy forces, eliminated 35 hostile combatants, completed a high-value target mission, and saved 8 American lives through exceptional skill and courage under fire. Amaya Ross never saw that citation, never knew it existed. She was already deployed on her next mission in another country, conducting another operation that officially did not happen, operating in the shadows that concealed America's most effective warriors. But on the wall of Lieutenant Commander Hayes's office, there was a photograph, 8 SEALs standing at the north barrier of a Syrian compound and one small woman holding a rifle almost as long as she was tall. No names, no location, no date. Just a reminder that sometimes when SEALs whispered that they were surrounded, salvation came from someone they never knew was there. The wolf does not announce itself to the sheep. It watches from the shadows, waits for the moment when its capabilities are needed, and strikes with precision that turns impossible odds into inevitable victory. Amaya Ross was that wolf, the silent guardian, the hidden protector, the sniper who emerged from shadows to change everything. And somewhere in Syria, 35 enemy combatants had learned that lesson the hard way in the last moments before precision shooting ended their ability to threaten anyone ever again. 8 Navy SEALs survived that day because someone they did not know was there had decided their lives mattered more than following orders that said reconnaissance only. That was the job, that was the calling, that was what operators like Ross did. When missions went sideways and lives hung in the balance, they emerged from the shadows, they changed everything, then they disappeared back into the darkness, ready for the next time someone needed salvation they did not know existed. Every single time without recognition, without fanfare, with nothing but the satisfaction of knowing that somewhere 8 warriors were alive because one person had refused to let them die. That was enough, that was everything, that was the silent promise every operator like Ross made when they accepted missions that did not officially exist. We are watching, we are ready, and when you need us most, we will be there, even if you never know our names, especially if you never know our names, because the most effective operators are the ones you never hear about until the moment their skills become the difference between survival and catastrophe. Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross, Shadow 1, the Guardian Angel 8 SEALs never knew they had until the moment she saved their lives and changed everything. 3 months later, in a different desert on a different mission, Ross found herself in another impossible position. This time it was a Ranger platoon pinned down by a force 3 times their size. This time she had 400 meters of open ground to cross under fire. This time the odds were even worse. She crossed that ground anyway, made it to an overwatch position that should not have been accessible, and set up her rifle while rounds impacted around her position. And when she opened fire, 23 enemy combatants learned what the 35 in Syria had learned, that somewhere in the chaos of modern warfare, there was a sniper who did not accept impossible odds as an excuse to let Americans die. The Rangers never learned her name, never saw her face, just heard that calm voice over the radio saying she had them, and watched their enemies fall with mechanical precision until extraction arrived and pulled them out of what should have been the graves. Shadow 1, the myth that kept proving itself real, the guardian angel that the command deployed when missions went sideways and conventional solutions were not enough. Amaya Ross would operate for another 4 years before retiring from active duty. 73 confirmed eliminations across 5 combat deployments, 3 silver stars that remained classified, 2 bronze stars with valor devices that she could never publicly acknowledge, and 1 Medal of Honor nomination that was buried so deep in classified channels that it might never see daylight. But numbers did not capture what she represented. She was the promise that special operations made to its warriors, that when you are alone, when you are surrounded, when death is certain and hope is gone, someone is watching, someone is waiting, someone will emerge from the shadows to change everything. That promise kept operators pushing into danger zones they would otherwise avoid. That promise gave them courage to take missions where support seemed impossible. That promise was embodied in a 5'6" woman who could shoot like a force of nature and who refused to let good people die when she had rounds remaining and targets to eliminate. Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross, Shadow 1, the sniper in the shadows who changed everything, still watching, still ready, still refusing to let warriors die alone, always.